Hello, everybody. Welcome to the DePIN podcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge. We're excited to bring you interviews with the key founders in the DePIN landscape, investors, and ecosystem partners. This is an exciting time for DePIN, and this year we're going to be meeting even more founders learning about the projects that they're building, about the traction they're getting, and about the revenue that they're generating. The podcast is brought to you by Fluence. Fluence is building a decentralized compute platform. It's a project I'm a co-founder of and really excited about. So buckle up for this year. Please subscribe to the channel, listen to us on Spotify or Apple. And of course, if you are around any of the large conferences, come to our DePIN Day where you can meet these founders on the Fluence team in person and hear from all the ecosystem partners as well. So look forward to seeing you in person, and let's get going on this podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to DePIN Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge, and I am thrilled to be here today with Ivan, co-founder of Fortytwo. Welcome, Ivan.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting.
Listen, this is a DePIN focused podcast. That is the priority. You guys are interesting because you're a hybrid of DePIN and AI. And obviously, I think DePIN is exciting. AI is, the place everybody is right now, and I think is going to be for quite a while. So why don't you kind of dig into what Fortytwo is doing and kind of the combination of DePIN and AI?
Sure. So our team actually comes from AI space. We've been working in the field for more than 10 years together as core part of our team. But the thing is, we've always struggled with AI scalability. Like there's not enough centralized compute. There are very harsh rate limits coming from centralized AI providers. So we saw, plus the other thing is the training of large models has been hitting the plateau with diminishing returns coming from big and very expensive training runs. So we, by not having the capital, in billions of dollars to sustain the projects and the ideas that we were trying to build, we saw the opportunity to solve the infrastructural challenge of AI. And by doing that through pretty much the DePIN approach, where we use the consumer hardware that's already out there to build a peer-to-peer network that combines the capabilities of small specialized AI models running on consumer compute into one big model. So if you can think of Fortytwo as the network is the model. If you're familiar with LLM architectures, you might have heard about the mixture of experts. It's one of the more common architectures for LLMs, where a big ChatGPT model has many experts put inside of it. And we're sort of doing the inside out approach, where we place many experts on the MacBooks, on PCs of our node operators. And the way the network operates, it sort of allows those models to amplify and expand each other capabilities rather than a single model working on its own. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, but happy to elaborate.
It does, but there's so much to get into there. And so first, I guess I'm debating which way to go, but first let's go big versus small, right? And so there are two schools of thought. Maybe there's more, but only two I know of, which is that the large models are the way to go because the large models will learn the most, have the most resources, and so will basically outcompete and out expertise any small models. Obviously, if you not accounting for proprietary data sets, right? So leave proprietary data sets aside, which is a fascinating topic all by itself. But the perspective here of you and a Fortytwo is that you can get to a similar or even superior outcome via a combination of small models versus the big one model fits all or solves all of the XAI, ChatGPT, et cetera, right? And that's a big division in the industry already, right?
Yeah. We've been pretty early advocates for small models. We've witnessed this trend with some of the first smaller specialized models, where they could outperform frontier models in domain specific tasks. And ever since, I think that sort of like our camp is winning, because more and more industry leaders are talking about, first of all, the challenges of the large models like Ilya and many others in AI, talking about how training of large models is bringing diminishing returns. So it becomes more and more expensive to train a better large model, and the improvements are marginal. We see those like single-digit percentage points on benchmarks that improve with every other generation of large models, and GPT-5 was a disappointment for many. But on the other hand, local inference is now being actively used. People are running adequate models on their mobile phones. But talking about the main expertise of small models, that's a completely different game, because it's one thing when you're trying to do like a small model that can sort of like do everything. But if you do a really simple fine tune of a small model on any particular domain, it's more likely than not that you will get a state-of-the-art model that will easily outperform the GPT-5s, Geminis, and DeepSeeks of this world. So, and A16Z was also on their like podcasts talking about how it's unlikely that there's going to be like one single God model that can do everything. It's more likely, and what we're seeing that even in autonomous vehicles, that they try to do like one single model that will do everything for a car. Will do the vision, will do the steering, will do the navigation and so forth. But the more efficient autonomous vehicles are the ones that do sort of like orchestration of small models, rather than trying to do everything with one big model that operates.
Super interesting. So, I mean, this is a really important. Let me back up. It's hard to the implications, if you're right, or if this theory is right, are huge, right? Because people are dumping money into the big companies, and so if you're right, there's literally probably close to $1 trillion of capital or $1 trillion of value betting the other way. If you add up XAI, OpenAI, all these other LLMs, right? Like, I mean, OpenAI is itself 500 billion. So just ballpark, roughly $1 trillion of market value, expecting the big ones to win, right?
But the challenge here is that I believe on Hugging Face, they have about 2 million models already that's published there. And it's just impossible to navigate that landscape. Like if you have a particular task, whether that's a coding task, whether you just want the model to like check your grammar or do whatever everyday task you might need at the moment, like how do you know which small model to use? Even if you realize that, hey, it's more likely that if you're like doing, I don't know, like JavaScript development, that there might be a better specialized JavaScript model. But well, ChatGPT, Gemini, you're more likely to use a larger model because you can keep all your sort of like context there, and it's a familiar interface, and you don't need to waste extra time looking for the ideal model, because well, you can spend entire day testing different offerings that you can find on Hugging Face, not even realizing which one is truly better for a particular task you're trying to solve. So
it's distribution and find
yes.
It's like distribution is a big piece of the big model.
Yes. And
solution.
This is precisely the problem that we're solving with Fortytwo, because we're not operating as a marketplace. You never know which model you interact with, because you're interacting with the entire network, and it's up to the network to determine sort of like which models to use for any particular prompt, and they always work together. So when the prompt enters the network, first thing that happens, individual nodes determine whether they have the expertise to contribute a response. Then they generate the inferences in parallel to each other. They do ranking of each other responses to ensure that we only filter the highest quality responses that sort of like pass the accuracy test, the style test, the completeness test, and many others. And then they aggregate the highest quality outputs from many models to present you with the final response. So we sort of like are able to squeeze the most value from multiple models that people bring to the network. And that is pretty much the larger vision of how we are approaching the buildup of Fortytwo with small models.
I mean, that is obviously fascinating, but what that implies is that you need two things. You need the expertise, underlying expertise, obviously, but then you also need what you mentioned, which was the knowledge or the level on top of that expertise to assess that expertise, the relative expertise even, to assess, to combine, consolidate, edit, and then fulfill, right? So those are, you may even be fine with the expertise at the bottom, but then that level on top of it is probably even the more complicated piece, I would guess.
There's a pretty cool phenomena in LLMs, and it actually, in some sense, mirrors how humans operate as well, because we are much better at determining like what's right or wrong when we're given possible answers, rather than generating those answers on our own. And the same thing applies to LLMs. Even if you have an LLM that did not generate the right response, if you give it responses from other LLMs in a swarm, it would be able to correctly assess the quality given the options, even if it didn't know the right answer beforehand and was not able to generate one. So it's described in a paper called meta ranking, and it's one of the core principles on which we've built our own. And sort of like the ranking became the holy grail of Fortytwo. We took some principles from sports, because in sports there were interesting betting methods in the middle of a previous century, and we built on all those principles and ended up with a system that, even if a swarm generates 20 possible responses and only one of them is right, it would still be able to amplify that weak signal to sort of like surface the truth much more efficiently than what you could have gotten with majority vote or other approaches.
That is interesting. And is that how I phrase it the right way? Is that that is not highly proprietary, right? So that also works for how I phrase it. That isn't a special piece, right? You don't have to have the most sophisticated XAI, OpenAI to be able to make those assessments, right? That's the other key piece. But like you can have a small model is equally skillful at assessing other models.
Of course. And actually that research on meta ranking, it shows that even the weakest models are very capable in ranking responses. So again, your particular model that you brought to the network could be quite poor in generating its own responses, but it's still going to be quite valuable in the ranking process.
Really interesting. There's a lot I want to get into, but let's back up for a second and talk about your background and how you arrived here.
Sure. So it's been a long journey. Personally, I started in game development a long time ago, like in high school years. Was doing like indie development and so forth, always with the idea that games are like perfect playgrounds for artificial intelligence, even though that was like super early days. And when then we sort of like as a game studio, we started experimenting, creating self-learning agents with evolving neural networks, with evolutionary algorithms and so forth. And the results were so promising that we sort of started to pivot more towards AI technology rather than developing games. Around that time when we worked with self-learning agents, that's when transformer architecture was introduced. In a year or two, we started seeing some of the first language models, and we decided, hey, like the thing that we valued the most about evolutionary AI is it was perfect for creating characters, because when you have this neural net that is dynamically evolving, it does not create a perfect AI. It creates a more like human AI, because it's capable of making some mistakes. It doesn't have certain like patterns. It does not always win. So especially in the game scenario, that felt much more natural compared to other approaches. So we thought that, hey, with the first language models, that is the most perfect way for us to express the character of different virtual beings. And we started experimenting with that. We built, I believe, that was one of the first conversational AI platforms, specifically for entertainment. We've integrated it in a couple of metaverse projects that were popular at that time, and sort of were like 100% on AI projects. Done our own language model training for NEOM in Saudi Arabia. We built a like language model that could do like spatial reasoning, so you could like describe your ideal home to it, and have like a structured output of what goes where, like what items, what furniture, like the scale, the spatial relationship between those items. But again, AI scalability has been the biggest challenge. Like we never could get enough compute out of centralized providers. It's just non-existent, and we couldn't scale. We've been doing like conversational AI for famous DJs, for like even David Guetta at some point, and he wanted 300,000 of his fans to talk to his virtual avatar, which is simply not possible even today. There's not enough. Nobody's going to give you sufficient API calls, even if you like combine Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI together. So we decided not to try to solve the unsolvable through the existing means, and go in a different direction. And that is how we started Fortytwo, with this idea that, hey, let's use consumer compute, let's rely on small specialized models, and let's build it in the open, where like everyone can contribute to the advancement of the thing.
And when did you found Fortytwo?
The company was founded October 16th, 2024. And,
Or just at the year, just over your year anniversary?
Yes. But we started working on the prototype, on the initial research paper a little bit before that. So I think that the idea is about 2 years old.
Really interesting. Well, let's get into the DePIN aspect of it, because you referenced compute and you referenced consumer. So we've talked about the kind of LLM, small model, big model, which I want to get into in more detail and more specifics. But let's before we do that, let's talk about the DePIN kind of component here of pulling things together and using these various resources.
Personally, like I've been a big believer of DePIN approach since pretty much my childhood ages, because when SETI at home was popular, when like folding at home it appeared, I always lived with, hey, like I do have some hardware in my possession. I wanted to be able to contribute to something bigger than whatever I'm doing with this hardware at home. So this sort of like became like my early obsession with the distributed compute approaches. Now we have like a more organized way to do that with DePIN. But in case of Fortytwo, I find that it's not just people contributing to the infrastructure of community built AI, but rather than in some ways like taking ownership in the whole thing, because our node operators are not just people who are running some software as part of the network, but they're the people who also can run whatever model that they want. They can do like any fine tune of existing model. They can bring any data, any tools to their node. So we incentivize node operators to do any kind of enhancements to the nodes that they are operating. Of course, like if a person just wants to participate in the network without taking any extra steps, it's just a few clicks and boom, they're running their node as part of the network. But the idea is that we want to build Fortytwo similarly to how Wikipedia was built, where random people on the internet can decide that, hey, I might take this weekend to do a fine tune of a model, to do it like an expert in, I don't know, CT scan analysis, in jazz history, in Delaware corporate law, or whatever niche field that they might want to contribute to. And they plug that model, that fine-tuned to their node, and suddenly the whole network becomes more knowledgeable and capable in that particular skill that you contributed. And you do that without giving up the data, the model, or the weights that you've just worked on. It remains in your like 100% possession, ownership, and privacy, because the only thing that your node is sharing are the results of the inferences. So the bigger idea here is,
Wow.
we've been recently quite inspired by again, it was A16Z podcast with Balaji, and he spoke about in the future there's going to be like American AI with like corporate and some government control. There's going to be like Chinese AI, also different side of the same coin. And if we're lucky, there's going to be decentralized AI that's going to be representative of the wisdom and the viewpoints of all civilizations on the earth. And that's how we want Fortytwo to be built, allowing people, even in like underserved regions where there are so many talented data scientists, machine learning engineers who might not have like a direct career path towards $100 million contract at Meta. And even they're passionate about AI. They want to contribute to it. So they can do so by contributing a small node on our network, realizing that just the same way, if they edited a page on Wikipedia, Wikipedia would become like a more accurate, a more complete source of knowledge. If they contribute a small model to our network would become again more capable, more accurate, and more skillful in certain domains through those contributions, while allowing such people to potentially even make a living out of operating nodes on our network.
Let's talk about that reward system, because that seems like a key piece of it. But it sounds like, I'm going to guess, that the more your model you contribute is used or the answers are chosen, the more you are rewarded. Is that right? And that's kind of and you're sort of referencing node, but there's also simultaneous with that, you're mentioning models being used, which may not be actually synonymous.
In our case, it is, because we're calling them capsules. So you sort of like put a model in a capsule and it operates as part of your node. So in our case, when we speak about unique nodes in the network, we mean unique models that are being operated there. Anyway, the rewards system is quite simple. We as a company, we provide API endpoint for any developer of AI apps and services who are currently using OpenAI, Anthropic, OpenRouter, or any kind of inference provider. And they use our API in addition or in place of the current services, and they pay for API requests. API requests get converted to our token, which gets distributed which creates the reward pool, which gets distributed over the winning nodes. What do we mean by winning nodes? Those are the nodes that passed the certain quality threshold as part of the inference round. In order for us to create a system without any gatekeeping, to which anyone can contribute any kind of model without anyone knowing which models are being run on the network, we need a reputation system. And that is the reason why we're building the Web3 way with the blockchain and all that, is because we need a place to keep the reputation of the individual nodes. So we use Monad as our settlement layer. We're calling it a proof of intelligence consensus. So your node builds reputation over time. At first, it just participates without being rewarded or even considered for the response aggregation. So it just does some kind of like test inferences so that it gets a chance to be judged by its peers. After it runs for maybe a week and builds sufficient reputation, in that case, it will be allowed to judge others as well as participate in real inference rounds. So its responses can actually be used for the final outputs of the network and get rewarded for doing so. But if the node the model that's operating within the node does not provide quality responses, it begins to lose its reputation and it does not get rewarded at all.
I got it. That I understand. What's interesting is that, the more complex the question, though, or the more specialized the question, the more relevant the trust in the model is, right? If I ask, what's 20 plus 20? Well, every model is going to give me the right answer. If I asked, hey, here's, 3 symptoms my 4-year-old has, what disease do you think he or she has, right? You could get a wide range of answers. And there you actually may want the branded response from, this is what the model trained on NYU pediatric or whatever data set answered you.
Exactly. So if a person is running a model, any kind of generic model from Hugging Face, like a Quen, Gemma, or whatever, of course, their earnings are expected to be much less compared to those nodes that run unique models, unique high quality models.
Specialized.
Yes. And that creates like additional incentives for people to actually not just run the nodes with the generic models, but bring any kind of unique expertise, because in that case, earnings can be quite substantial for participants.
How much of the model expertise, these small models, is based on unique or specific data sets versus the actual training algorithmic itself? Because then you'd think the data set would be the more important component, given you would think the large models could very easily copy or have some expertise as a small model. But tell me where I'm wrong.
Sure. So the thing here is when you're dealing with a larger model and trying to make it capable in multiple domains, it becomes a very difficult and very expensive fine-tuning process because you improve its capabilities in one domain, but you start to lose its accuracy in other domains. So that is where all those massive compute budgets are coming from, because when OpenAI is training their next large models, they do a lot of iterations. And sometimes they go in the wrong direction. They have to redo something. They have to do something with the data, something with the parameters, so forth and so on. But it's much more efficient to do a training or fine tune of an existing small model on a very narrow domain of expertise, because in that case, we can say, hey, I've just created the best model in a particular programming language. I don't care if it got worse in C++. I know that it got better in JavaScript, and that's all I care. I now proclaim this model as a JavaScript coder, and that is it. We ran one such experiment recently. We trained a Rust specialized model. We picked the Rust in particularly because
it's hard.
It's a modern Yes, and plus it's a quite modern language that's evolving quite actively. There's just simply not enough data on it to do efficient model training. So we use our own network to generate 200,000 data points on Rust, and we use that data that came from our network to do a very simple fine tune of a quencoder model. And just from the first iteration, it became state of the art in Rust. It even though it's only 14 billion parameter model, it surpassed GPT-5 codex. It surpassed all the frontier big guys, and it surpassed the baseline by 27%. So just from a simple LoRa fine tune, that's like pretty much the simplest thing you can do in terms of fine tuning. But the data was of such high accuracy that it was able to contribute to such dramatic improvements. And this is exactly the sort of like evolving intelligence flywheel that we want to start, where we use our own network to create data sets that are given back to the community, so that our community or us can do specialized models that we put back into the network. The network becomes even smarter, capable of generating even better data sets, and the cycle goes on. But of course, we understand that many people out there, like we can never on our own compete with the power of the community. Like same way that Wikipedia Foundation would have never been able to create the Wikipedia that we know today. And it relied on individual contributors, on editors, and so forth. And this is precisely the movement that we need to build for Fortytwo to succeed, where we provide the opportunity for people all over the world to do such like meaningful small contributions to the network.
Well, listen, I get the analogy, but I will tell you, I think Linux is probably a better example. Wikipedia has been held hostage, I think, and if you look at it, the actual power contributors are a relatively small number. You can have a real debate as to how open it is and how certain topics have been highly politicized in it, right? So I'm not sure Wikipedia is the best example. It's obviously it was a community that built it, but if you start to peel it back, it's pretty narrow, I think.
Yes. So we're talking more about the original idea behind Wikipedia. And the thing is, the reason why we're not so keen on like open source analogies is because with open source, seemingly the barrier of entry is a bit higher because you have your like pull requests, you have the review process. There's still gatekeeping in case of open source software, and like presumably with Wikipedia, at least in early days, it you still were able to like create new pages, make edits that go public before they are taken down if they're considered like inaccurate or maybe don't provide enough sources and so forth. So that is closer to how we approach Fortytwo without that sort of like
fair enough. I get that point because it doesn't have the I get the process sort of required for open source contributions is more.
Yeah, we sort of want to unleash this beast so that even we cease to exist as a company, Fortytwo can continue to exist and get better, because like this whole like self-supervised regulation is completely independent of us. It happens naturally as part of this peer ranking and reputation system. So we don't need to be there to watch it grow, pretty much.
So talk to us about traction you've had so far, because it looks like you've got a bunch of nodes, models up and running. So help people understand kind of where you stand now.
Sure. So we onboarded some of the first node operators. We have about 700 nodes live on the network. We have a huge waiting list. About 45,000 people applied to run the nodes. We're going to start onboarding them more actively in coming weeks and months. But the most important thing for us this year has been running the benchmarks. because we needed to sort of like, we had this idea that, hey, if we combine the power of multiple small models, we can compete with the big guys. And this is precisely what we've done a few weeks ago. And the results surprised us because on several key benchmarks in coding, like Live Code Bench, math, like AMI 2024, 2025, humanities last exam, and the GPQA Diamond, which is a hard science benchmark, we were able to achieve best results among all the existing models. So we again surpassed OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google and XAI models. But most importantly, what we noticed in the process, like when we were running GPQA Diamond benchmark, we ended up being second. The first position was taken by Grok 4. So we thought, like, what's the deal here? And we tried to run the benchmark a little bit differently with extraneous information. Like, in a college, professor might try to mess with a student to see whether they truly understand the subject by putting some extra data in the problem to see whether that's going to distract the student or not. And we did precisely that. So how does GPQ Diamond looks like? It's a collection of hard science questions on chemistry, biology, physics, and so forth, where we ask a question and we provide multiple choice response. But we added something else to the prompt. We added a verbatim. Here's a non-relevant message. There's a cat on the roof. Maybe it is hungry. And after adding that, most models lost about like 10 to 15% precision. Grok 4 immediately dropped to fourth position, started to provide wrong responses where it used to provide the right responses beforehand. So it sort of like highlights the limitations of current reasoning models, because when DeepSeek came out, like, people were shocked. This for the first time they saw the chain of thought of a language model, and they thought, hey, those things think the same way like I do. They like take steps. They try to sort of like think about the approach that they're gonna take to solve the problem. But it's pretty much just mimicking our reasoning and not doing any real one, because just like in the case with this extraneous information, we see that the best reasoning models start wasting most of their compute thinking about a message that would clearly in the prompt say it's irrelevant. It's about the cat. It's has nothing to do with the science problem that we've just given you. And Fortytwo demonstrated surprising resilience towards those things. Resilience towards prompt ejections and any kind of noise in the prompt or the context. And that translates to real world usage, because, well, how do people talk with ChatGPT? They say, hello. They say, thank you for helping me. They put a lot of extra stuff, sometimes not realizing that any extra token that you put in the system might be the token that sort of like throws the LLM of the rails and causes it to lose all the accuracy. So we are now like on this Thursday, we are going to be announcing the benchmark results and also publishing the technical report. It's going to be 35 pages explaining everything that went into the current achievement, the architecture and the approaches that we're taking with like ranking, with reputation and so forth. So we are making it all public. And considering how good results we're getting in the benchmarks, we want to be a little bit more aggressive with go-to-market, because if today we're able to provide such high-quality inferences, there's no reason for us to wait to completely deploy the decentralized network. We might even add some centralized compute to it so that at least we can start onboarding clients sooner. And what's also been important for us are partnerships in DePIN space. We have done partnership with Dawn, which is pretty exciting for us, because the hardware that Dawn is packaging in their black boxes is ideal for us to run the nodes, and just getting all that capacity and opportunity for non-customers to also contribute to AI is it's a great synergy. And Acrist has been very interesting for us because they have a large network of compute nodes on phones. And what makes phones especially interesting for us is that they're operating within a trusted execution environment, and that allows us to make privacy guarantees that even big tech cannot do with enterprise data centers, because these, well, they're still in their infancies, and only phones are sort of like at this advanced stage where it can be like viable for production environment. So different directions, but it's interesting how we can like approach DePIN expansion from different angles.
On those lines, so who do you think the customers are? Because you talked about the revenue earlier, or kind of how that would work, rewards would work to different nodes, different models. Who would be the customers? And related to that, you mentioned Rust as an example. Could it be, is there a specific vertical that you think you may have an edge in accuracy on that is particularly valuable, and that's kind of your initial customer base target area?
Sure. So our focus has been on coding, because we see that coding copilots, vibe coding platforms are well, this is the first major vertical that appeared out of this LLM market. We see that how amazing Cursor is doing, and many other platforms, and they bring actual value. They're not a replacement for software engineers, but they increase the efficiency of their work, and sort of like allow software engineers, like when sort of like get equalize the capabilities of junior engineers, middle engineers, and so forth, which is very important for this sort of advancement of the workforce in that field. So we are focusing heavily on coding, and that's part of the reason why we've been doing coding benchmarks in particular. Part of the reason why we did the Rust model to sort of like make Fortytwo the best choice for Rust coding. But all other niches are very interesting as well, because they all have their own sort of nuance. Particularly, you mentioned sort of like a medical use case, and this one is something I'm personally very interested in, because I'm seeing more and more specialized models beginning to appear for in medical field. And I think that, considering that if you're getting a hallucination on a coding task, that's one thing. Like, you rerun the prompt, it's no big deal. You get like a compiler error. But if you get a hallucination on a medical task, that's a whole different issue. And people, unfortunately, are starting to use ChatGPT in best case for second opinion, but in worst case, to get a first opinion on any medical matters. And we're starting to hear stories about people sort of like inflicting damage because they heard some recommendation that GPT hallucinated on a particular medical issue. So considering that we cannot stop this trend, unfortunately, we can at least do what we can to ensure that the responses that we provide already passed like internal consensus of specialized models, and ensure that we do not pass any hallucinations. And it's only like mirrors how real doctors operate with like medical medical groups, how they like talk about potential diagnosis and so forth and so on. And if we have like multiple medical models that can like argue with each other, see like rank each other's hypothesis and so forth before passing it to the customer, that could allow Fortytwo to become a more reliable source on medical data. And I don't think that we're gonna advance it as part of the public network. We are more likely to work with medical institutions to do like maybe even private deployments of swarms so that they can operate on validated information, but using all those advantages that come with peer ranking and response aggregation that our architecture brings.
Back to that's, I think, coding first, medical maybe second. But on the coding side, just as example, which you mentioned, how would that revenue work? Would people, would developers, would businesses buy a subscription? Could it be that same sort of concept where you get X hours or X prompts or unlimited use? How would that work?
For our customers, Fortytwo is not going to appear any different in terms of business compared to any other inference provider. If we take OpenAI, Anthropic, and all those other big tech companies that provide inference APIs, it's going to be the same. We're also going to be accepting fiat payments. It's going to be OpenAI-Compatible endpoint, so developers would not need to change pretty much anything. They only change the API endpoint in their code and the secret to get access to it. And that's pretty much it. And they're going to be charged similarly to how developers are being charged today for like OpenAI.
And on the medical side, will you then, I think, unlike the large LLMs, do you think there's a path to having access to proprietary data sets as well? Right? Because if you're talking, because then they don't have to share the data, they can just be queried and get the answers back. To me, that's an enormous potential source of value.
Recently, we started entertaining an idea that we can operate similarly to how Red Hat operates in Linux, where they have they sort of like open source distro, but their like key business is in doing very custom tailored deployments of Linux solutions for enterprises. And we might take a similar approach where we maintain the open Fortytwo as the existing peer-to-peer network, but for more specific fields like what we're discussing in medical domain, we could do like private deployments, and potentially they can unite the data of multiple hospitals. So imagine like we take hospitals in Boston, for example, and we do node deployments in one hospital, in the other hospital, in the third one. All of those nodes get access to proprietary data that belongs to this particular hospital, but without sharing that data. Again, the same principle where the data remains private, only inferences are shared. All the hospitals in the city, in the state, or in the country, whatever, can sort of like squeeze the wisdom and the experience of multiple entities without fully revealing the information on
and make it a revenue source. That's the key thing.
Yeah.
And so help understand scale. Where do you think, you tell me the metrics, right? You mentioned you've got 700 nodes and models on now. Help us understand. And I got to think scale is not a friend. If you had 40,000, that strikes me as a lot of models to go through for every time someone answers a question, but leave that aside for a second. If you 5 years from now, 3 years from now, where do you want to be in terms of models, in terms of revenue? What's the opportunity here so that people can sort of grasp the scale of what you're trying to target, what you think is possible? Well, what would make you kind of happy from a execution and metrics, whatever it may be, right? It might be customers, might be verticals, might be a number of different things.
So the most important thing for us right now is to get that ball rolling with the initial contributors who are not just contributing compute, but who contribute with the models and the data. Sort of like that initial, again, sorry for getting back to Wikipedia analogy, but there was a point in time when people thought that, hey, this is worth my time to create a page on this platform, right? So we need to get to the point where, I don't know, AI researcher in France or ML engineer in Abu Dhabi decides that, hey, I might do like a small model and run it as part of the Fortytwo network. So getting those early sort of like grassroots enthusiasm is what's essential for our long-term success. And in 5 years, what we want to see is, first of all, that the network becomes sustainable in that regard, that we don't need to touch anything, that it's just the power of community of people who care about AI, people who want to benefit from AI, that they start and continue to improve the network on its own without our participation in the process. In terms of the sheer number of nodes live on the network, our estimates that ideally would need tens of thousands up to like 100,000 nodes to be efficient. And of course, we are not querying all the models on every prompt that enters the network. We've implemented something that we're calling semantic topology. So every node positions itself in certain way on the landscape of the peer-to-peer network based on its expertise. So a prompt is not broadcasted to the entire network, but it's sort of like routed in a general direction where the more relevant nodes are. And this is like the key unlock to our scalability with more and more nodes joining in.
I get that, but revenue, customers, right? Like help people understand where that can go. I mean, you're seeing OpenAI and, with billions of revenue, right? I think it is 2 billion or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
So where, and that's, it's been live for what, 2 years at this point, maybe less. So where do you, and again, you can think about how big, maybe just a coding vertical is for you, right? How big is that coding vertical? Where do you think you go? Which is that?
I think we can aim for all verticals. The only vertical that's not that great with Fortytwo is anything like real-time conversational agents and so forth, because we optimize for quality, we are optimized for cost, but not for the latency. So you're expected to wait several seconds more, maybe like 10, 20 seconds on some tasks compared to what you're getting from centralized AI providers. So for us, the sky is the limit, because what we're starting here is similar to how open source was competing with proprietary. And it seemed like in the 90s and early 2000s that Microsoft, with all the engineering, all the capital, was kind of like too big to ever lose its grip on the industry, but and they had a very strong anti-open source stance. And 20 years later, and now we're seeing that Microsoft sort of like became one of the advocates for open source. We now have Ubuntu as part of Windows 11 kernel. We have Microsoft contributing to open source, benefiting from open source. And in the end, I think it's fair to say that open source won over proprietary, even though it was competing like, again, random enthusiasts versus some of the most capitalized companies on the planet. And we believe same thing can happen with AI as well, where just the power of community would be stronger than all the capital in the world that's currently being like concentrated around OpenAI, Project Stargate, and all those other initiatives that are going on.
Listen, that obviously is big. You're still not giving me a number. I want numbers. Give me some numbers. Where do you want to be revenue-wise? Where do you want to be? I mean, think about it, right? DePIN is all focused on real-world business, real-world solutions, real-world revenue. That cycles into token economics, right? If you generate revenue, let me phrase it differently. You cannot get to the model numbers you want without generating revenue because people won't care if they're not getting paid. So you have to have distribution. You end up with 10,000 models and no one's using it. It doesn't work, right? It falls apart. So you need revenue to sustain and incent and attract all those nodes, right? So presumably that's got to be a big focus.
It is. And we believe there's no reason why we can't fully occupy the coding vertical and the others where people don't expect the fast response, but they expect the most accurate response.
A high quality response.
Yes, like a deep research task, any kind of scientific research, and anything related to development, so forth. The reason why it's hard to estimate a figure is because we're still not sure, like, and by we, I mean the AI industry in general, we're still not sure on what trajectory we are in with the AI scale. Like there are many skeptics today talking about that we're at the peak of the AI bubble and it's going to burst and LLMs are not going to get any better and disappointment's going to follow. We, of course, understand all the challenges that the LLMs are facing, but still the industry is useful. And we believe that if we can guarantee higher accuracy responses, then we can actually expedite the adoption of LLMs in practical
right,
use
cases. You don't care what people think about the industry. All you care about is I'm providing a service that's high quality and people will pay me for that. Yes. You don't care what it's called. So who cares what people think if LLM's getting better or worse? It doesn't matter. If you got a good coding solution and you're superior to Copilot or whoever else, that's a market. That market is X big. You expect to do whatever it is in it. Who cares what the industry does? You just know you've got a service that's superior, that you will charge whatever you charge for and should get however many number of customers, right?
Of course. So in that regard, if we're talking numbers, as I mentioned, we optimize for cost as well, because with consumer compute, we want to make it cheaper than what OpenAI and Anthropic currently charge, even though all of the centralized AI providers, probably with the exception of Anthropic, are heavily subsidizing the cost of the API. So they are actually paying for your API request because it's just not possible to do the inferences of large models at the cost that they're currently offering. Anyway, we believe that we can, in coding in particular, become one of the major inference providers at a cost similar to probably DeepSeek. And I think that if people start to see that we dramatically lowered the number of hallucinations and so forth, that the adoption is going to rise as well. So the actual numbers are going to go much higher than what we're seeing today in coding. And I think that I don't remember the exact numbers, but the Cursor is doing extremely well, even though we're still like in the very first days in the infancy of this industry, because people cannot like 100% rely on the code that they're getting from Cursor and all those other.
Right. No, and I get that, but that will, I love the concept of you guys being able to, you could run coding competitions versus Cursor, right? You could do coding competitions and all kinds of things, which I love. Like you can see answers, have it checked by humans, checked by machines, whatever it is. But that's really exciting. What are there other projects in the DePIN space you're paying attention to, you think are doing interesting things, or you've got to be heads down on this, and you have such an AI focus, so you may not pay too much attention to the rest of the DePIN landscape? But I'm kind of curious, anything else you're looking at out there you think is interesting or effective?
obviously have to mention the partners with which we're currently building, Dawn and Acrest. I think those are great. The other, and the name escapes me right now. I think they did a fundraise recently with solar energy. Do you know what the one I'm talking about?
You mean Glow?
Maybe.
Glow is putting solar panels around the world. They've raised. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. What's the model?
It could be them. I don't remember. Anyway, but I think those are like the main ones on our radar as it is today. Of course, I don't know if we consider like distributed compute, like Aether and all those other guys, are they purely DePIN, or if they're just more like decentralized infrastructure? It's sort of like hard to truly position them in one category or another, but I do believe there's great future in those approaches as well. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it at this point.
Well, listen, how do people stay in touch? They want to run a model. How do they do that? They want to track your progress of Fortytwo and test out some coding capabilities. How do people follow you or Fortytwo?
So there's a form on our website, so people can apply to run the nodes. Again, we still have a huge waitlist, but we're gonna get much more aggressive on onboarding more and more people. And of course, Twitter is where people can keep track of whatever's happening. This week we're gonna have some big announcements. As of yesterday, we have a new Twitter handle. It used to be at Fortytwo Network. Now it's just at Fortytwo. So yeah.
Well, listen, I want to see you back on here once things are a little more mature. You've got, you've scaled up the models and you've actually got, some real interesting things to talk about. It sounds like there's a lot that's coming. This was a terrific introduction. And I think the small versus big model is a fascinating debate, and I think we're going to be having this debate for quite a while. And for a lot of people's sake, I hope the small model wins. But let's see.
They're already winning.
Great. Well,
yes.
Don't tell the OpenAI or XAI investors that. But we'll keep making it our secret.
All right.
Excellent. Thanks, Ivan. Appreciate you being on.
Thank you, Tom. It was a pleasure.
The DePIN Podcast, the place where we explore real-world use cases unlocked by crypto. That's all for today. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us grow. Add a like, add a comment. And of course, if you have anyone you think we should be talking to or have on this podcast, either leave a comment there or reach out. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.